Hi guys, so next blog post, next video, blog commentary, vlog you could say. So this one is 10 industries that could use blockchain technology. Part 1, I'm just going to do 1 through 5 in this first video because it gets long if you go into detail with a post of this length. So let's get started. First, who needs blockchain? Well, basically, any industry with a need for somehow striking a balance between access, privacy, and security, or some combination thereof, could use blockchain technology. So, I mean, if you really want to stretch it, pretty much any type of business that uses computers could potentially use blockchain. But some of them, some of the industries out there could really stand to benefit from it immediately. So I've kind of scoured the interwebs and done my own research and selected 10, but keep in mind that, I mean, this is just as applicable as the internet itself. So it's kind of silly to limit it to 10 industries. You could theoretically say all of them. Um, so the reason is blockchain essentially provides a tamper-proof ledger of digital events, right? So in my last blog post, um, I mentioned that potential uses of this type of technology extend way beyond cryptocurrencies. But an interesting point is that because the first use case of blockchain technology has involved cryptocurrencies in the form of Bitcoin, and then all of its offshoots, that has kind of shot blockchain into public consciousness because Bitcoin has been performing so well and kind of almost to the point that people fear it like disrupting the global economy. That's not going to happen. That's going to take pretty massive consensus. But my point is that if blockchain had come about in something more obscure, say as a way for banks to keep records in their own systems, the people that know about blockchain the group would be a lot smaller, and it wouldn't be as exciting or well known. So it's kind of worked out that cryptocurrencies have leapt to the forefront of public consciousness, and that a lot of that has to do with blockchain. So it was a good use case for sure to really generate interest and public awareness about it. Here I just go on to talk about why is blockchain so applicable. Well, we live in an increasingly digital world. 30, 40 years ago, again, blockchain might have been something really obscure just for like nerds to keep records on computers and talk to each other. These days, because so much of our lives, not just entertainment, but important things like, excuse me, sorry about that, getting over a bit of a cough here. Important things like medical records, banking and financial records, even our ID and things like our passport, and a lot of our lives are stored online, there's a kind of an inverse relationship in that the more convenient our lives become in terms of online accessibility and being able to disseminate any information about ourselves anywhere, anytime, there's a corresponding rise in vulnerability. It's just kind of how it is right now. Yeah, there's a lot of security in place and things, but it still happens all the time that people get hacked, and a lot of it goes undisclosed. So blockchain is applicable because it fits in that gap where, on the one hand, you do want the convenience and ease of use that the internet gives you, but on the other hand, you don't want people having such easy access to it that they can just go changing things. So right now, it's kind of hard to strike a balance between those two things. So blockchain fits right in there very nicely, gives you access, but it's very, very difficult to go changing records on the blockchain. Which, if you're a criminal, is a very bad thing. If you're just a legit person trying to share your medical records with a hospital or sell a house or something, that tamper-proof nature of the blockchain is amazing. You get all the access and ease of use, but you also have an added layer of security, almost to the point of it being almost like something like analog, where it's like you did it, no one else can change it. But anyways, Next, will blockchain make a difference? Yes, obviously. That's why we're talking about this. That's why it's becoming, more and more known among people, and there's more and more ICOs, and not even just ICOs, but companies in general are taking a use in blockchain. Again, to be clear, blockchain technology doesn't necessitate cryptocurrencies. You don't have to have cryptocurrencies to use blockchain. You can just use it as a database. Cryptocurrencies generally use blockchain technology because it's the best way to keep track of transactions. But keep that in mind. Okay, so let's get into it. Industries that could use blockchain technology. So this is a list of industries and services that could be vastly affected, even revolutionized by blockchain technology. But to be honest, the list could be much longer. I've tried to keep it as varied and broad as possible without writing a book about it, which is no small undertaking. And you'll probably notice a lot of similarity in what improvements blockchain brings to each industry and how it does it. That is, again, because we are moving increasingly into a digital world, and it is only in the world of digital media and transaction that the blockchain can exist. So the underlying theme to all of this is the digital nature of the technology and information and access to it. So just as the internet is kind of this fundamental one-size-fits-all platform, blockchain has some similarities in that. So, you can buy a website and create any kind of content you want, but the fundamental nature of the platform will be the same. So the blockchain is similar in that regard. It's kind of a substratum of digital transaction, and on that you can build whatever. So the fundamental nature of it is the same, but the industries it could be used to help our legion. But the way it does that, there's going to be a lot that's kind of the same. Anyways, first is the IoT network management. So the Internet of Things, or IoT, is a force to be reckoned with. So this is really the world of smart devices where everything is kind of plugged into the internet. Your toaster, your refrigerator, of course, your smartphone. And so these things, because they're online, they are able to respond to the environment and share information with each other, but they're also vulnerable to any other kinds of attacks that would, you could come to your smartphone or your computer. So what blockchain could do is bring a new level of security to this. It might not be the biggest deal with your toaster, if you say like, hey toaster, don't toast the bread so much, it's not going to ruin someone's life. But if it were a smart TV that were, say, for example, recording sensitive conversations, or your smartphone with your banking records on it, or say medical devices in the hospital that were able to download information about a patient. It could be a famous patient, or someone with a lot of money. There's no end to the damage that could be done with certain types of access to certain types of devices. So blockchain would bring the same kind of security to these devices as it does to transactions in cryptocurrency, right? The fundamental nature of what's happening is the same. So cryptography, verified access, and untamperable records of what has happened. So that's it in a nutshell. Next industry is healthcare. So this is not so much about the technology of healthcare, but more about administration and how the system works. And right now in the U.S. in particular, it's kind of a mess. So it's, as I say here, healthcare in the U.S. is about as cohesive nationwide as the retail industry. That is, it's not. So the healthcare industry is very much privatized, and service and administration and procedure can vary from hospital to hospital. There is no real uniform nature to it in the United States. So as a patient, there's literally no real way of knowing what you're going to get and how much it's going to cost, which sounds kind of crazy in any other industry. Maybe an exception might be taking your car in to get fixed or something, but generally in any other industry you could say, here's the deal, please quote me a price. And they would say it's going to cost you this much, and that'll be that. It's not like that in healthcare. Part of the reason is they don't really know what's wrong with you until they check you out, and that can take any number of tests. So what's being proposed with blockchain in the healthcare industry is, instead of saying we're going to charge you um, for each treatment we give you, each procedure, each test, there's a new idea that's saying, okay, we're going to implement this smart contract that's going to have you on one end and us on the other, and the contract is going to stipulate that you won't pay for what we do, the details of it at least. You're going to pay for the results, is one approach. The other approach, that's called value-based healthcare, by the way. They're saying, okay, let's do away with this kind of ad hoc, here a test, there a test, stay in the hospital here, go to this clinic there. Let's do away with that and just put a platform. You come to us, you pay us when you're better, you pay for getting better. Okay, the second element would basically have to do with healthcare records. So patients would have control over their own records and who accesses them by having their own private key, which would be just like a Bitcoin wallet. This would do away with a large degree of the currently rampant overcharging, inefficiency, corruption, and general backwardness of the current healthcare system. Okay, it would also add a tremendous level of security to people's medical records. So, and that would also, assuming that the entire country were able to kind of register on this blockchain, or there might be multiple blockchains, but assuming the blockchains had interoperability, this would also guarantee a very efficient transfer of information and a very cohesive, at least more so than we have now, a much more cohesive nature to the industry as a whole. So it would, in the end, protect privacy a little better and save costs just by cutting down on the amount of labor that goes into upkeep, all the upkeep and access and transferring. It's unbelievable. So there's healthcare in a nutshell. Next would be retail loyalty points. This isn't quite as heavy as an industry, but the idea still stands that blockchain can kind of support this. So this is talking about basically things like loyalty cards and coupons, right? So as it is now, a lot of this relies on like stamps and cards and coupons. There's a really like old-fashioned vibe to the retail industry, and it's often more trouble than it's worth for people to keep track of all of this stuff that they get, right? And you can also add to that a high risk of fraud, right? People could, if you were inclined, you could literally make your own coupon, or people can share coupons with each other and whatnot. So what blockchain could do here is, on the one hand, for the retail industry involved, it could keep better records of everything and also serve as a really accurate database, almost in the way that like Google or Facebook is able to track their clients. The retail industry could do this too. I'm sure they already can, but blockchain would add a very much kind of more, almost like hardwired version of the same approach. And they could also, instead of having loyalty points, they could also generate their own in-house cryptocurrencies, right? Which, depending on the specific nature of the project, those points could be exchangeable with other cryptocurrencies. It's similar to kind of credit card points and cashback and rewards now, only it would be using blockchain technology. So there would be a higher resistance to fraud and probably a lower barrier to acceptance, and it would just benefit people a lot more cohesive way of doing things. Next is number 4, supply chain management. So this one is huge. The global supply chain estimates vary, but Some people say that as much as 80%, 85% of all the industry on the planet is somehow directly involved in the global supply chain. So basically what the supply chain is extracting, it's the entire process, all the way from extracting natural resources, so iron, timber, uh, even animal products like fish from the ocean or milk from cows, minerals from the earth. And then from there, the entire production process of transport, processing, manufacture, distribution, all of the shipping involved, all the way to the final user and retail sale is the supply chain. And it's a massive, massive, massive industry. But because there are so many players involved, we're talking, even for the most basic products, off the top of my head, let's say 100 different companies touch it. You know, if you really think about all the way from wood to paper in a book somewhere, right? I know a lot of paper is recycled, but that's just, you know, an example. So my point is that um, any product you see on the shelf in a store has passed through a lot of hands, a lot of different warehouses and companies, and been shipped all over the world. You can just track the carbon footprint of something as simple as a shoe, and it's phenomenal how much is involved in the back end of creating and shipping and stocking and all for all the products you see in the world. So what blockchain could do is create a cohesive record all the way from extraction to final retail sale for all of these products, which on the one hand would kind of just make things very much easier to track things. Not that that's a huge problem now, but another element is it could kind of highlight inefficiencies in the system. So, you know, it's not like we're a bunch of morons on the planet that don't know what we're doing, but inevitably, when you have, you know, so many stages to a process and not a lot of communication down the chain, there's going to be inefficiency. It's like the telephone game, you know, where one person starts off saying ABC, and then after 100 people, it's totally unrecognizable. The supply chain, of course, isn't that inefficient, but by inefficiencies, what I'm talking about is wastes in terms of time and money. So blockchain technology could highlight these and make them very clear, much easier to address, much easier to streamline, among other things, and also reduce a lot of the paperwork. So there are companies working on these things, actually. Maybe I'll have to talk about that later in a different blog post. Okay, last one for this post. Number 5, the energy sector. Okay, so this is obviously a pretty important area of our lives. Unless you want to pretend like you're living in the 18th century, you probably have a connection to the energy sector. So, and there are quite a few similarities between the global supply chain and the energy sector. And in fact, they're very much interconnected, right? It would be very hard to run a factory or a mine um, without power. So again, in the energy sector, there's a lot of players, there's a lot of big complex things happening, and not always the best communication, and a lot of money moving around. And also we have a huge number of people that are dependent on this system, and they're dependent on the system being efficient and fair, which doesn't always happen, right? In the US, you guys are pretty lucky. There's a lot of uh, oversight. In other countries in the world, it's not always like that. Here where I am in Japan, it's, you know, pretty legit. The Japanese don't really like to cheat the system in that kind of way. But what blockchain could do, in the same way as it would do for the global supply chain, is it could create kind of a bird's eye view, a very cohesive, accurate, real-time picture of the entire energy grid. And so this could help with a few things, not the least of which, again, is dealing with inefficiencies. Um, you know, as convenient as it is to be able to turn our lights on or heat our house, there's actually a huge amount of waste. And some of it is actual waste, some of it is just loss in the network. So the blockchain technology could bring a lot more accurate data about what's actually happening out there. And it could also help prevent against corruption, you know, if it were able to track actual amounts of energy being distributed in real time without reliance on a third party. Um, it would be a big deterrent towards screwing people over. So there it is. Again, basically the blockchain, what it does fundamentally, regardless of the industry involved, is bring a level of clarity, clarity, transparency, cohesiveness, and security to whatever industry it's connected with. And what makes this remarkable is that it does it without reliance on a third party. And you can design a different type of blockchain, but we're talking about, you know, a more or less self-sufficient blockchain network. So I will put part 2 out here pretty soon, but I didn't want to turn this into another hour video. If you guys like longer videos, let me know. I'll be happy to do it. But just to recap real quick, the industries discussed in part 1 were the Internet of Things, IoT network management, healthcare, retail, in regard to loyalty points, supply chain management, and the energy sector. Part 2, we'll talk about the data marketplace, ID technology, copyright and royalty transparency, education, and real estate, along with some final thoughts. So that's it for this one. As always, if you guys are curious, you can comment below. Feel free to subscribe, or you can contact me directly here at admin@bitcoinbuildify.com. I also work with a few other platforms where I'm making a little bit of money on the side. It's kind of a long-term game. Crypto, as it is now in 2018, isn't the most liquid asset in the world of fiat currencies. You can't really go to the store and, you know, buy a hamburger with it. Some places you might be able to, but if you're interested in kind of building holdings with it and starting a little bit of an investment portfolio, you can email me and we can talk. Anyways, until next time, happy cryptoing, do your due diligence, and stay out of trouble. Thanks for watching.